Welcome to the Sunday Reach by the Dominican Friars of the province of India. On our life journey, it is natural to ask whether we are in or out of heaven. The teaching on the narrow door addresses his followers and the other Jews on their way to Jerusalem. The question on the number of the saved when the Messiah comes, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, when Christ establishes the kingdom, shows their concern about their being in or out of a system of sanctified power. The image of the narrow door in chapter 13 verse 24 directly challenges the assumption of automatic salvation based on religious affiliation or by being a prideful chosen people. Jesus' journey to Jerusalem in Luke's Gospel, chapter 9 verse 51 to 19 verse 27, is a final phase of his ministry. He is knowingly walking towards the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to it. During this time, his teachings focus on what it truly means to follow him. After his entry to the city, he will mournfully weep over Jerusalem for seeing its ruin. In today's Gospel, there is a teaching and a warning. The teaching is to strive to enter through the narrow door, and the warning is about the rejection of those who had claims of great familiarity with the master of the house. The great banquet in Isaiah chapter 25 verses 6 to 8 is set on Mount Zion, a politically and religiously significant place. But the heart of the very system of Jerusalem had become exclusive and nationalistic. God's favor became a monopoly of the people of Jerusalem, the first among the chosen people. The meal is described as a feast of rich food, of well-aged wine, a banquet of abundance and joy. This great abundance contrasts with the transactional give and take of the temple system, where sacrifices and offerings were must for God's favor. God freely provides the feast for those who are the least and the last. The religious leaders of Jerusalem saw themselves as the rightful and only guests of God's table, but did not know the heart of God. Instead of being an exclusive meal for the chosen people, the banquet as a sign of God's authority over death and evil is a universal celebration, a banquet for the entire world. The meal is not the end goal. The feast is not simply a reward for the righteous, but an act of unconditional love, which is a celebration of life that wipes away tears from all faces. This banquet is an ongoing participation in divine action and a mutual completion of joy. The purpose of God's presence is to heal a broken world. The God of Isaiah's banquet is a God of radical vulnerability and self-giving hospitality, who embraces all nations. It is a challenge to any religious system that seeks to control access to God's love and grace and keep them reserved for the privileged. When Jesus announced the gospel, he found that the privileged, the first, and the righteous rejected the feast. Jerusalem rejected Jesus and killed him. The divine feast was filled with the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. The Jerusalem-centric notion of a privileged place at God's table is entirely subverted. The last will be welcomed in from all the corners of the earth, while the first, who were secure in their religious identity, are now explicitly told that they will be rejected from the heavenly feast. The claim, "We ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets," shows claims of over familiarity with God and affirms their unquestionable place with God. Jesus' response, "I do not know where you come from," is a statement of radical disconnect. It is a reminder that the eating and drinking and hearing him in streets have miserably missed out on something. There is an ever-open gate of unconditional love and mercy of God. In person, that is Christ the door. Our self-righteousness and comfortable assumptions of God and heaven have made us too big, hard and bitter to enter that gate. These are the treasures secured and sanctified by the religion centered on power and greed. These great possessions and the gods that rejoice over them must be left aside to follow Jesus. Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan redefined neighborly love not by shared religion or heritage, but by radical, compassionate action toward anyone in need. Another narrow gate. In chapter 15, Jesus' parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son are a direct response to the judgmental attitude of the religious elite. This is a challenge to their self-righteousness. Their spiritual pride, their sense of deservedness is a wide road that keeps them from the narrow gate of empathy and mercy. The first, the religious elite, became the last in terms of acting out God's will because they prioritized law over love. The holy city, the temple, made them privileged and favored. Even God was powerless to break that system. Jerusalem, more than a place, was a system of religious, political, and economic monopoly. Historically, Jerusalem was not part of the ancestral land divisions given to the tribes of Israel. David's capture of this city was a political move. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. It was decided to be the very dwelling place of God and the center of tradition, law, and religious power. By centralizing God's dwelling place, he centralized his own rule. While the concept was that God chose to dwell in the temple, in practice, the temple served to contain God's presence within a human-made institution. This created a belief that God's favor and protection were tied to the physical structure and the rituals performed there. Thus, Jerusalem was a source of sanctified power that was legitimized by being tied to a holy place and the customs formulated accordingly. This system, while serving a religious function, also solidified the power of the priesthood and the monarchy, making them the mediators of the divine. They formulated a covenantal framework that saw God's presence residing within a closed sacred space, accessible primarily through the rituals and mediation of the priesthood. This created an us versus them mentality, where the religious insider was assured of their place at God's table. This same system, in its rigid adherence to legalism and its own institutional power, rejected and killed the very author of life. A picture of a royal dining of the privileged and the favored within a self-serving religious system do not suit the heavenly banquet of Jesus. The banquet parables serve as a counter-cultural narrative against the boisterous ritualistic function of the holy city. God's grace overflows the boundaries of the temple and is offered freely to those who have nothing to offer in return. The gate to enter into the great banquet is narrow. Jesus clearly told that following him would not give a status like being a disciple of a great rabbi. The discipleship is not defined by following a set of external rules. It is all about self-denial and unwavering commitment. The banquet parable in the next chapter, chapter 14, verses 15 to 24, points to the rejection of the gospel by the social and religious elite. The least and the last were brought in to fill the feast. There, God's grace extends to all, not just to a privileged few. Stories like the Good Samaritan taught that true righteousness is found in compassionate action. This narrow door is one of the self-giving love and mercy, a path that often runs counter to the legalistic and judgmental nature of organized religion a preferred wide gate. The Christian life and a celebration of the Eucharist should not be ending up in the risk of mere eating and drinking and hearing of innumerous numbers of preaching of the Word of God. The Eucharist is not a magical ritual that guarantees salvation based on mere devotional attendance. It is a reenactment of Christ's ultimate act of vulnerability and grace, entering into a threefold communion Jesus realized: the communion with the Father, communion with us, and our communion with one another. We often create a heaven and a God who is enthroned there that is comfortable for us. We celebrate that safe space on a wide road. The narrow gate is a call that requires a courageous and compassionate listening to our own vulnerabilities and a humble surrender to the tender heart of God. It heals our injuries and makes us whole, having put on Christ. It is an invitation to leave the wide road of legalistic pride and superfluous familiarity with God and step through the narrow gate of vulnerability, mercy, and compassion.